If your question does not get answered today, I'm confident you will leave knowing who to contact. And if you require further assistance, feel free to contact the chamber and we'll happy to assist you. If you have not yet turned in your questions, please raise your hand and a volunteer will collect them at this time. If luncheon time runs past 1 p.m., please exit quietly if you are unable to stay. The last question will be asked no later than 1:15 p.m. And we request that the panelists keep your responses to right around 2 minutes so we can get in as many as possible. Like I said, at this point, we just have a few. So I sent over some questions to the panelists to begin the discussion, so we will start there. First, I would like to thank our sponsors, Era Energy, American General Media, Cottage Health, Chris, Fire Marshal and Battalion Chief Dina Paschke, Police Department Captain Joseph Mariani, Planning Manager Brian Halverson, Building Services Manager Al Johnson, the President of the Lompoc Valley Cannabis Association, John DeFriel, Attorney and Cannabis Regulatory Expert, Rob Traylor. And also in the audience, we have our City Manager, Mr. Jim Troop. He is not on the panel, obviously, but he is here and is willing and able to answer questions as well. Okay. So we are going to start with our questions for the panel to open discussion. So our first question is going to go to John DeFriel. Hi, John. Thanks for being here. What has the Lompoc Valley Cannabis Association's impact been on the legal licensed cannabis market in the Lompoc Valley?
All right. Angel.
Oh, the range. You want to just come and walk down here, maybe?
So the Lompoc Valley Cannabis Association is still a very young organization. And we haven't had a lot of time to be as involved in the community as we'd like. But I think most recently, our most important contribution was,
It must just be me.
my voice. At the end of the year, the state stopped issuing temporary licensure, and the state itself is not sure how they're going to process new annual licenses in 2019. So most importantly, in end of November, the LVCA worked with the city to create a local letter of authorization allowing licensed applicants to apply for their temporary licensing while waiting on the final city approval. That allowed many operators to get those temporary licenses, which you still cannot become operational without final occupancy and sign-off from the city. But I think that's a really huge thing for getting operators online in 2019, because once we have the temporary licenses, we can transition into provisional licenses and then into annual licenses. So as final city approval happens, those businesses can come online. If that weren't the case, even with final city approval, the state doesn't know how they're going to process the number of annual licenses that they have, and it could be a whole year before anyone gets licensed. So even with city approval, you could be closed down without for the entire year of 2019, perhaps. So those are our greatest lobbying advantage and benefit to the city this year.
Thank you, John. Our next question is going to Brian Halverson. What is the biggest challenges the planning department is facing in relation to zoning requirements for cannabis businesses within the city of Lompoc? every shop now, every county shop.
I think one of the biggest challenges the planning department here in Lompoc has experienced is, I have a little map here, but it's essentially small, but everyone knows there's a buffer requirement. And so we get lots of calls, multiple calls, sometimes a day, asking if they're in the buffer or outside the buffer. So that buffer relates to daycares, schools, and youth centers. So a lot of people are asking, can I go to this certain location in the city? And so the planner will immediately look at that map, get back to the applicant. If it's outside that buffer, then they can go in. As you know, in Lompoc, there's a cap on the number of dispensaries or whatever, if it's manufacturing or whatever particular use it is. But that has been probably the biggest. It's kind of a jockeying for a position as far as who's going to go in first. Obviously, if there's a youth center or a school, they have gone in first, and so that's going to restrict what can go in around it. So from a land use perspective, that's been the biggest challenge. Once they know they're outside the buffer, they get their application in, and then it's a matter of just going through the process and the various departments that it needs to clear. So, and it can take some time, sometimes 4 to 6 months, and so that's probably been the biggest challenge from a zoning standpoint.
So what's the buffer?
It's a 600-foot buffer, and that's for if it's a school, a youth center, or a daycare, as defined in state law. So that's what that buffer is.
Thank you, Brian. Our next question is for Al Johnson. How will the influx of new cannabis businesses opening in the city affect the timeliness of processing applications and permits? And how does the department intend to continue to promote a thriving and business-friendly community?
Hello? So would you like to repeat the question now that we're settled?
Okay, I will. How will the influx of new cannabis businesses opening in the city affect the timeliness of processing applications and permits? And how does the department intend to continue to promote a thriving and business-friendly community?
As far as the timeliness, we are trying very hard to treat the cannabis industry as we do any other applicant. We are fortunately or unfortunately, we are extremely busy, and things are looking way up in the city of Lompoc. The permit process is quite extensive for the cannabis industry because there's a lot of different agencies looking at their applications. But we try very hard to put them in the queue and treat them just as any other applicant. As far as the, the second part was?
How does the department intend to continue to promote a thriving and business-friendly community?
So as far as the business-friendly portion of it, we are trying to make sure that the information we give out is accurate and concise. We try to make sure that we give everybody the information that they need so that they can get through the process in a timely manner. It is really a long and involved process, but it is we try to make sure the process is the same for everybody, so that in giving out the clear and concise information, we try to make the process faster and actually try to streamline it for everybody.
Can you give a range of average time that it takes?
For cannabis related,
Right, I mean, you said you treat all businesses the same, but is there general?
well, right now in the city of Lompoc, we try to make sure, now, this is for the permit process, not the application process. So there's two different processes involved in the cannabis. If you're asking about the building permit process, it's usually the building department first time through is 2 to 3 weeks, and we are open 5 days a week. A lot of the other jurisdictions in the area are actually taking quite a bit longer, so believe it or not, we're getting everything through the building department in about 2 to 3 weeks, first time through.
Al, can you let everybody know how many people are actually in the building department?
2.
Can you repeat the question?
Mr. Troop wanted to let everybody know how many people are in the building department. So there are actually 2 full-time employees for the city of Lompoc, and we do have 1 consultant, and he is a employee that's a building inspector.
Thank you. Next question is for Rob Traylor. What challenges have you seen new businesses face as they've tried to enter the legal cannabis market?
Thank you. The cannabis business faces challenges that the typical business doesn't. To follow on what Brian said about real property, the entire regulatory scheme focuses on real property. If you have the right parcel, you're okay. If you don't, then you're out of luck and you won't get past the starting line. But it's more than just that map that he showed, because it's not a static map. You have to keep in mind that one of those sensitive uses arises before the cannabis business is licensed, and they too would be excluded. And in addition to that, you have to take into consideration that anybody with a lien on their property would be concerned about leasing to a cannabis business because of the federal prohibition and fear that their note might be called. So real property is a huge concern from a business perspective. Additionally, the cannabis business faces additional costs in terms of tax because they cannot take deductions like a typical business would. They cannot bank at most banks. I mean, I've called essentially every bank in town and said, hey, I have a cannabis client, they want a bank account. And the question is, or the answer is always no, because of the federal prohibition on cannabis. And that's to say nothing of the fact that the state just yesterday, I haven't had the opportunity to read through all of them, but just yesterday dropped the final regulations that will govern this industry until they're changed, because it began with the emergency regulations and then readopted emergency regulations, proposed permanent regulations, modified proposed regulations, and now they finally filed them yesterday. So when a business community needs certainty to make business decisions in terms of which direction they will go from a strategic perspective, it's kind of difficult when the ground's constantly shifting.
Thank you, Rob. This question is for Chief Kuris and Chief Paschke, or I'm sorry, Captain, Chief, whatever. Okay, gotcha. Dina. It's Dina. With the fire department. What impact does the regulation of new cannabis industry businesses have on the fire department as a whole, and how are you preparing for these new challenges?
Okay, the cannabis industry is really expanding quite rapidly. It's gone from blowing cans and butanes through glass tubes to very sophisticated extrication equipment. And so we got to actually work a lot with the cannabis industry. John, for instance, we worked with, and he kind of demonstrated to us how the whole extraction process can actually be done very safely. Everything continues to change and keep moving. It's all new to us. We've got to look to our other cities for advice. Denver is one that we actually have been, talking to and working with, because that city alone has 500 cannabis facilities, and they have 5 people on their fire department that are dedicated just to the cannabis industry. The whole city has a total of 58 people just dedicated to the industry. We have 1. Well, actually 2, and my stuff, deal with all the inspections and everything. So, that's one of our biggest issues, is just keeping up with things. Things change so fast. There's a new product out there that's just coming out. It's THC crystals that are brand new, 99% pure, and we don't even know the process of it yet. We have no idea how to deal with it. So those are the things we're looking at and trying to deal with, and we just want to stay ahead of it. The NFPA just recently published chapter 38 now, that is kind of a guidelines, and it just came out and we don't even have it yet. So, we have to work with each other to try to make this work in the city. Because, our main goal is to keep the community safe and the employees safe, and to keep the cannabis business here thriving. You end up blowing up your business, you're out of work. So, we want to make sure that things are safe. Gina, you have.
Sure. One of the ways we really like to do business here, since we're a small town with a big heart, is to reach out to our community members and work with our design professionals and the business owners, and kind of get a feel for where they're coming from, where we're at on either a level of sophistication or a learning curve, and then really partner. We want to do this together because we're only as strong collectively as we all work together. So we do meet with our local architects. We've been working with some of our farmers, with some of the chemists. But I didn't do experiments in cannabis, so we've been likening it to formal training into, quite frankly, a reaction is a reaction. And when we can start talking science, it's working out much better. This is now bringing the industry into a profession. And that's the part I'm really excited about, because I don't want to go to places where people sleep and live because they blew themselves up in a bad chemistry. That's not what we want to go on. We want to go and have people healthy and thriving, have businesses providing safe products that don't have bad chemicals in it that are being consumed. So we're looking at from an academia point as well. As the chief mentioned, it's a learning curve. So I think we've been very open to say that, hey, this next rollout, our newest codes, and the international code are coming out 2018, they're adopted in 2019. We're now going to get a chapter dedicated to this topic for a very good reason, because you're impacting and becoming a real legitimized profession. And I'm really proud about that, because if we're up and we have all the codes in place, we all know collectively what the rules are and what the regulations are. It's much easier to move forward rather than inventing the wheel. But there are several designers here and a couple developers that are coming into manufacturing that we've met physically at the fire station and at their offices. And I'm very thankful for those partners in our community, because I feel that we're coming together as a whole and as a team. And without that type of commitment on both sides, so we both understand what the ultimate goal is that safe community and a safe product, we wouldn't be here today. So your attendance and looking out there, how many people here care, that's great, and that's what we want to go forward with.
Thank you. Next question is for Captain Mariani. From a public safety perspective, what challenges do you foresee the community facing, and how are you preparing your team to address them?
Hello? There we go. My team is me. It's a good number. And I'm glad to be here today to talk about this topic. And Rob alluded to in his comments about the fact that we've been waiting for the state to finalize certain things. There's a whole Title 16 book of regulations for cannabis business, and these are proposed texts. And those of us who have been involved in the process have been working off of this, and it's yet to be finalized. So hopefully the state will finally come to a conclusion as to what the absolute regulations are. You know, one of the things that we did here in the city, we were pretty proactive, was back in August, a group of us went to some other jurisdictions that had commercial cannabis permits in place or the process in place before us. And we learned that it was a very lengthy process, and more than anything, because it's dynamic, nothing has been finalized. So for us, that's always a concern. When I look at an application, you know, I look at it from a different perspective. My concerns are security, the division of labor, the ability to access the activities at that business, which are required or which are going to be required, so that we can have remote access to video. And then when I also look at it, we've done really well when you look at the fact that on Friday we're going to have our first dispensary open here in the city. And if you look at alcohol, the average alcohol license takes about 9 months to a year to acquire. And I know there's been some level of frustration with some people because they said, God, the process is taking so long. But like I said, nothing has been really static or stable. We're learning as we go too. And so it's a learning process for all of us. From a security standpoint, you have primarily a cash-only business. That's a concern. We would like to think that those who are involved in the business are going to be legitimate and run good operations, but we always have to be concerned about the criminal element, because that also makes it, I don't want to be a fearmonger, but if you have a business where that kind of cash is going to be there, you have to have good security measures in place. And we hope to work hand in hand with the cannabis community to make sure that we can do the most to promote public safety, because at the end of the day, that's our primary concern.
Thank you, Captain. Okay, so we do have a nice stack of questions now from the audience. Any last questions, please? Michelle, you see her walking around the room. We'll get to them as we can. I'm going to start with these. So this is a product public safety question. What are the rules for public use of cannabis products? And part 2, what are the rules for personal growing of plants in a residence?
Well, our ordinance says that you can grow up to 6 plants for personal use. And so that's one of the restrictions. As far as, you know, one of the things that we also are facing is we'd like to think, just like, you know, liquor establishments would hope that people drink responsibly. But if people are using it under the influence in the street or driving a vehicle, that's going to cause concerns for us too. And unlike alcohol, where we have a measuring device to determine the level of toxicity or the level of sobriety, we don't have that with marijuana yet. So that's going to be a challenge for law enforcement too. There are some companies in the works that are working on some devices to help us with that. But you know, when people are out there in the public, you know, if they're under the influence in a public place causing a disruption, they're going to be, you know, subject to the same rules that we have for alcohol.
Just to piggyback on that, one of the reasons why only 6 plants stay in a residential, we have been in grows, if you will, in residences that are not legalized, and they have an exorbitant amount of plants. And these homes were built for people to sleep and eat and occupy, but they weren't built to sustain all these fans and all this extra heat and all this electricity that we're pulling and pushing in. And we're also changing that atmosphere. We don't have the air exchange. And I'm an expert on spores and mold, but we have to know that this changes that climate that people are living in. So one of the things why there's a limit of how many plants, it also affects your personal health and the health of the occupants that are inside. So there is a safety aspect as far as your own well-being. So I want to bring that to your attention as well.
And who monitors the products sold in dispensaries to keep consumers safe?
So the state, it takes quality of the product very seriously, and cannabis products sold in legal markets are the most highly tested for quality and adulterants of any product in the entire world, even more than pharmaceutical, like anti-cancer drugs. So everything, all the product has to get sold to a distributor. The distributor is responsible for the QC. That is then sent out to a third-party testing lab. They test for pesticides, microbial content, water content, cannabinoid content, terpene content. It's over 200 molecules that are tested for, and that's tests are at the parts per billion level. And so if anything fails that, it's held in quarantine through the distribution company. They have one chance to do remediation, do a second test. If it fails the second test again, the product has to be destroyed. Every single applicant for a state license has to demonstrate a minimum $5,000 bond to cover the cost of destroying the product. So you get 2 tries. If you fail, it's destroyed.
Thank you. This is a zoning question. What are zoning restrictions regarding tasting rooms and retail cannabis sales?
So the first question is the tasting?
Tasting rooms and retail.
Well, in general, we would be looking at that component of a retail. So it just following the same requirements. What was the other part of the question?
What are zoning restrictions regarding tasting rooms and retail cannabis sales?
Yeah, I mean, from a zoning standpoint, like I mentioned earlier, it's still going to be if that use is allowed for that zone, and then of course the buffer. But as far as the restrictions, parking is going to be looked at as each application comes in and when they do the TI. But I mean, in general, that's going to probably most likely just be a retail establishment. We don't really differentiate from a land use standpoint the tasting versus the retail component.
Thank you. Would the city support temporary cannabis permits? Oh, sorry.
Just want to follow on that answer. There's a distinction between retail and on-site consumption. As far as the setbacks go, it's 600 feet for retail and 1,000 feet for on-site consumption. So when you look at the retail, or frankly any business availability, there are blue dots all over the map. But then when you look at the 1,000-foot buffer, essentially the whole map is blue, and there are very, very few retail options for on-site consumption. So the fact that this city has issued one is a good thing, but I don't anticipate very many more.
Thank you, Rob. Would the city support temporary cannabis permits for cannabis-oriented events?
We have Rob here, but as far as I've been told by our attorney that we are going to be allowing those type of events. So until they tell me otherwise. And I just wanted to clarify, and I appreciate you clarifying the previous question, is one thing I didn't mention is the 600-foot buffer, and then there's the 1,000-foot. So when you said consumption, the smoking is the 1,000-foot buffer. So thank you, Rob, for clarifying that.
With respect to temporary events, under the emergency regulations, the only places you could hold cannabis events were those that were permitted for type thing. So essentially there is no place like that here in Lompoc. There is in Santa Maria, but Santa Maria has a completely different regulation for cannabis. However, as I was reading through the permanent regulations this morning, there are new rules, and the local jurisdiction can give authorization to do that. So when I heard the new city manager say that he's looking forward to a wine, weeds, and seeds event, at the time, it wasn't something we could do here. And while there is still a prohibition on I believe it's on-site consumption for cannabis and alcohol, so you probably wouldn't be able to have the two at the same time. If the city got an application for a temporary cannabis event, I would suggest that they are allowed to grant that permit. The question would then be whether or not they would.
Thank you. I have two questions that are similar in nature, so I'm going to ask them as one. I've heard concerns that people from outside Lompoc who have more financial means might profit more than local people. Are there any protections to keep as much money in Lompoc as possible? And the second question that was similar is what's being done to ensure locals have a chance to get into the industry? Any takers?
This is not the Rob Trailer Show, so you guys can jump in here at any time. As a practical matter, there's no distinction between who the owner of a business is, where they live, where they come from. They can come from any city, any state. Ultimately, there's a sense of capitalism here if you have the money to invest. And you get the right property, you have the right plan that's adaptable to moving regulations, you can have the opportunity to succeed, and that doesn't really discriminate in terms of residents.
Thank you, Rob Trailer Show. If a person in the cannabis, oh, sorry, go ahead.
So our business, we're a breeding company, a farming company, a manufacturing and distribution company. Most of our farming operations are out of the Santa Rosa Road area. Our business currently has about 85 employees, and we have another 70 people that work for us through toll processors in Oakland doing our manufacturing and distribution. 15 of those people are actually residents of Lompoc, and I'm sending them up to Oakland every single day of the week and renting houses up there for them while we build out our manufacturing and distribution facility here. So I think the thing that's going to benefit Lompoc the most is jobs creation. So I'll be able to bring those 15 guys back down here and they can live in their homes that they have here in Lompoc. And then we're also going to be able to cancel those contracts in Oakland and create another 65 jobs in Lompoc in the next 6 months. And we forecast over the next 12 months to create about 120 jobs. And that's just our business alone. So I think you're going to see a lot of jobs get created, and these jobs range greatly, and all are well above minimum wage. We have PhDs on staff. We're moving PhDs to the area. We invest heavily in training our employees. So even if people start at a low level, there's a career ladder for people to climb up. We train them really well, and they become skilled laborers. We offer health benefits, dental, vision. So we're very invested in investing in the community and the people that live here.
Thank you. This is a licensing and permitting question. If a person enters into the cannabis application process, okay, no, I said that wrong. If a person in the cannabis application process has been going through the process and a zone secure business/youth center makes an application, is the first application in priority position? Does that make sense?
This does come up where, let's say, a youth facility is existing, and so the map that I showed, the buffer has been created because that youth facility, just as an example, could be a school too, and an applicant wants to apply, but they can't because it's too close to that youth facility. Once that youth facility leaves, I'm just using the youth facility as an example, vacates that property, then we could go ahead if a license a license was submitted, and now we have knowledge that they've left, then that cannabis could now have the priority. We can process that and go through the normal routine of approving a license. And that's already happened, I think, twice. But the map, as Rob said, the map is constantly changing. As we get more information about those land uses, Whether they've come in or they've left, then we're constantly updating that land use map, or the buffer map, I should say. Whether it's 1,000 feet for the consumption of smoking, or if it's the youth center, school, or daycare.
One branch we follow is if there's a cannabis business there and a youth center decides to move in next door or within that buffer, it doesn't preclude the cannabis business from moving.
Correct. Yeah, the reverse, just as Jim has said, they can go in there if it's already been established. If cannabis is already there, and let's say the youth center says, we don't care, they can go in there. Yeah, they have that right. So, thank you.
Debbie?
Yeah, that was my question. Can I ask, because you didn't quite answer it.
Sure,
Can I
Debbie.
ask a question? So the question actually is, because it takes so long for a cannabis applicant, they make their application and they've gone through all their due diligence for 9 months or 11 months, then they're in this process and somebody with the youth center, because everyone's relocating right now because their spaces and their leases are not being updated. They move into that area. Because they were already an existing business, their permit to conduct business or their event or whatever they're doing with their youth is going to be, given quickly, within probably 6 weeks or so. What happens to the cannabis person who's been in the process for 11 months and doesn't have his permit yet? Because he's not really in the spot already first. He's in process.
All I can say is it's a first come, first serve. We do continually coordinate with the city attorney's office as far as those uses are established. Yeah, I mean, there's some uses that are going to go in a lot quicker. For example, let's just say a small school goes in and Cannabis submits an application and they're thinking, okay, we didn't know of that at the time, but we submitted an application. That's when it's very important for the city staff to voice that to the applicant. You did submit it, but something has already gone in. I would defer to our city attorney's office as far as that, like I mentioned earlier, that jockeying of position. But some uses can just a business tax certificate and just go in. And then, of course, the cannabis license does take quite a bit of time. So I would be on a case-by-case basis of when it came in and what the existing conditions are.
So they have no protection, is my concern, for the cannabis applicant who's spent thousands and thousands of
Or
dollars.
someone maliciously creating a fake business.
Just because, and I know Rob wants to speak, just because they submit a license doesn't mean it's a guarantee that they're going to get approved. And then once they're in, then, obviously they're in. So it's a case-by-case basis. I mean, it's in process, but I don't think that we are now saying stay away, other people can't go in. It has to be approved.
I think the answer to the question hinges on when the state issues the license. If the licensee has a license, then their premises would be permitted and any sensitive use could arise right next door. However, if in that processing timeline a sensitive use arises, the buffer extends and that person who has expended probably tens if not hundreds of thousands of dollars and the process will be excluded.
I was just going to bring up the fact that when we do apply for an application with the city, there's like a 3-tiered process with the consulting firm that's involved. And the first tier is about verifying zoning and making sure that there's simple. So that gets caught pretty early. I don't know what the main course is if you're getting at that stage. Probably more.
My only concern was because right now people are moving around a lot. They're losing leases, so you have places that are, like gymnastics or things, with youth centers. They're relocating, so now they're moving over and they're creating a new buffer zone. Well, the buffer zone could have been a clear spot for somebody in cannabis, and now it's become not clear anymore. And so my concern was for the cannabis industry, who's been trying to move forward, and they've been in this application process since March, and all of a sudden somebody else moves in. Is that person moving into a zone where they can say, look, there's applicants already, so you're going to move into this zone knowing you're going to go into a zone that's not sensitive, or are they just allowed to move in and just wipe out everyone around them? That's the question. Just seems like there's no hard, fast rule.
There's like a soft target. There's no hard and fast date, right? Maybe that's a good question for you.
The zoning,
Sorry.
the zoning is the first step, but I understand what you're saying is that, you know, they could say at the time, we could look at this map and go, okay, you're clear, you're outside the buffer zone, or there is no buffer zone because there isn't that sensitive use there. But then sometime during that process, you know, someone goes in, a sensitive use. So we're constantly talking to the city attorney's office, and that would be a time where, as the planners and the rest of the city staff sees that business tax certificate come in, that we have to coordinate that. But I would say that sensitive use could go in as long as Mr. Traylor said, that license, you know, it's not approved. They're not established, and so it would be a loss. But we're really trying our best to coordinate the various land uses that are going in. It can be tricky though, it really can. And timing is everything.
I guess just on the planning zoning issue, wouldn't it have made things a little bit easier and maybe expedite the whole process if maybe they designated a zone? That zone would contain 1 block, 2 blocks, whatever. Then the application process would be more free and clear to identify where the cannabis could be.
So Tony, I think I must have your question up here. Someone asked a similar question. I'm going to rephrase it because we're also live streaming on social media, so I want to make sure that your question is being heard live streaming also. So the question here, which I think it might be your question, did you submit a question similar to that? Okay. Basically, the question was asked if anyone has suggested like a similar to a wine ghetto, maybe a cannabis centralized location of cannabis shops in one location.
At this time, that has not really been something that the council has considered or staff has really come to the city manager and discussed. That being said, as a planner, I like to see trends, I like to see things, and as I'm looking at the map, there is an area that is kind of becoming a little more dense as far as cannabis uses, and that would be in the northwest quadrant of the city off of Central. So they're starting to kind of consolidate in that area, but we haven't, just staff and the council have not said, okay, let's have an effort to create what you're talking about.
Okay, thank you.
One of the cities that we visited when we went out did that, and it was well received by those who were involved in the process because they could also share a lot of services and they were concentrated. But yeah, that happens in other parts of the state.
So to piggyback on that comment that you just made, there was a question, are we reaching out to other communities for information and guidance on how they set up their city codes, ordinances, etc.? So you kind of touched on that. It does feel like we are. Does anybody want to comment additionally on efforts to do that?
I know the fire department has been reaching out to just about every community that's been dealing with cannabis. And what I kind of found out is that the longer they're in it, the more they're saying limit the amount of facilities and put it in a zone or location. You can much better keep control over it and regulate it that way. But our council's decision was to open up the whole city. So that would be something that we'd have to address with the council. But we do reach out. Dina just today got back from a fire prevention meeting where they were discussing cannabis with all the local communities here in local cities. So we're there all the time. It's new. We're trying to share information, trying to help each other out.
This is a light question.
Regarding new industrial building construction, are there any additional set of rules or guidelines is legal required in the terms of architecture or features that will limit its ability to be used for cannabis processing, assuming all building codes and zone requirements are met?
Part of that question, they said that they were going to be building codes in the part, so there are different aspects of the industry. The more that you are doing in the building, the more restrictive the construction requirements are. If you are doing, distribution, would be the least requirement, the extraction would be the most restrictive. So in the extraction process, based on what it is that you're doing, you could become an H2 or an H3 occupancy, which is a hazardous occupancy, the most restrictive of the building requirements. So in the extraction process, you are required to have very tough requirements regarding the fire-resistant construction. You are required to have 2-hour separation walls, meaning that everything going into those hazardous occupancies, explosion-proof fittings. So in answer to your question, the more hazardous the occupancy, the more you need, the more fire-resistant construction that you have, and that is reviewed both by the building department and the fire marshal. And the reason is because when things go wrong, if they do, what we try to do is limit the amount of area that will be affected by creating the separation walls at the floor ceiling.
Since it's problematic for cannabis to deposit funds, how does a business do payroll, benefits, etc. on the federal government side?
It is a little bit different for everyone. It's not easy at all. One of the real challenges is that ED really is electronic funds for payroll taxes. So you have to have some sort of banking relationship to be completely compliant. Now it depends on the scale of your business and how much money you have to get in. Anyone paying cash may still pay payroll in cash, but you're still cutting a check like you would cut a check through QuickBooks or whatnot and withholding state and federal income taxes. If you have banking, then you're just writing a check or wiring those income taxes in. Otherwise, you are driving suitcases full of cash to the franchise tax board or the IRS on a quarterly basis. Ironically, the larger the business you are, all of a sudden it's becoming more likely that you can find banking because banks like money. So if you show them a lot of it, they're more willing to take it versus a little bit. So it's a risk-benefit reward for them as well. And hopefully, from what we're hearing, in the next 12 months, we'll very likely see Congress pass a bill clarifying banking for states that have passed legalization, and we're very hopeful that banking will be opened up. From what we're hearing, the banks are lobbying the feds more than anyone, even more than the industry, to facilitate its money because it realizes now a multi-billion-dollar industry, and they want that money.
So the feds take the money, but they want to acknowledge it as a legitimate business. Is that what I understand? So we actually pay a higher tax rate than any other industry in the nation, and they require us to pay it in full. So they take more money from the cannabis industry on a percentage basis than from any industry.
This is a licensing literary question. How many applications are expected to be completed and issued, and in what section? So dispensaries, cultivation, manufacturing, testing.
Again, if you go back on the map, it looks like most of them are on the map right now. We have 26 applications, and it looks like most of them are retail, we do manufacturing, and we have distribution. We have a testing one, but now the city council reconfirmed that testing will move forward to just one testing. But as far as anticipating what's going to happen in the future, I really don't know if that 26 is going to double or if it's going to shrink. I really don't know now. I don't know if you...
As Brian said, I don't know what is going to happen. As was mentioned earlier, we did approve our last first certificate of occupancy last Friday, and we done 3 or 4 reviews this week. So the process is speeding up, and it is getting to be a little bit more standardized. But one of the things that is very important to know and understand is that this is a business that is regulated not only by outside agencies, but it also is in the building process. You're looking at a lot of other rules that the cannabis industry is not really familiar with. And in the plan check process, they're giving a lot of corrections that they may not always know and understand because it deals with accessibility and the electrical and codes, all of the different codes. So it's very important that during the process that the easy way to explain is the more information that you have on the plans, the faster your plans are going to go through the process. That being said, the person that is doing the plans for you are generating the plans. If they are familiar with the process is going to go a lot faster for them. As I said earlier, times are good, and right now the cannabis industry is having a lot of difficulty finding people that are able to generate the plans that they need in a timely manner. So it's very easy to say that your plans aren't that great, but that doesn't always help people get through the process. The process, it is a long process, and as I said, the information that you have, the more information that you have, if you hire a residential designer and you're submitting a commercial cannabis extraction process, it's going to be a long process for them because they don't understand everything that is involved in the plan-check process. So knowing that you need somebody that is on the commercial side of the spectrum makes your process go a lot faster and a lot easier.
This is a question for public safety. Do you anticipate more crime due to cannabis dispensaries?
Will not, and we'll have to wait and see, but if you look at other jurisdictions where this happens, we're still being called that increase. So we hope, once again, as I mentioned, that those who run these businesses will be responsible, that will have proper security measures in
expenses we do. And as I mentioned before, the fact it's a cash money business is really appealing to the criminal element. You can't dismiss that. So hopefully these places will have proper security measures in place, that if they have to transport money, that they're going to take those extra measures, expend some of their profits to ensure that. Because if not, I mean, it's ripe for the taking.
Okay, and to add on for the fire standpoint on that as well, if you're making legitimate businesses that have laboratories are protected by fire sprinklers with PhDs and chemists doing the experiments and doing, basically cooking what they need to cook professionally, that we're going to take out some of the element that we're doing illegally in homes. So from a fire response, I would like to go to less butane explosions in residences that are causing great bodily harm and exposing our first responders. This business here, legitimizing it, can remove some of that risk. We'd like that to happen. That would be one of the absolute great unintended consequences for this business.
Just to tag on to that, you know, we got to get rid of the do-it-yourselfers. That's one of our biggest problems. Just recently, in the last month, we've had 2 honeywell explosions here in Lompoc Valley. And those are the things that we got to stop.
And are there different licenses? This is a license and permit question. Are there different licenses for hemp versus marijuana sales?
My knowledge of the regulatory scheme is specific to cannabis. I know there are very different rules for hemp as CBD, cannabis. I haven't spent any of my time focusing on those. Sean, you may be able to contribute to this, but the licensing scheme that we've been talking about today has been specific to cannabis, not hemp.
Yeah, the 2018 Farm Bill legalized hemp for CBD production. What that essentially did, though, is kick it down and say this is now an FDA-regulated product. But the difference being, so now we have federal legalization of hemp, which has normalized it as like an agricultural commodity, specifically. So it's like broccoli. Since we only have state legalization of cannabis, which has THC in it, under Prop 64 passed by the people, it specifically mandates a state and local licensing scheme and broke out what those licenses are and how it all functions. So you actually need specific licenses for cannabis, whereas hemp, it's just like broccoli.
Thank you. Did someone call me? Oh, Tony. It's right in front of me, see, I can't see what these things are.
I wanted to tag on to all of that. I guess it pertains to safety, city licensing, application fees. Have we reached out to the outside communities on those application license fees? Because I see there might be a wide range. That may also include with maybe beefing that up to help support our local police and safety people.
So for our social media stream, just to reiterate Tony's question, she wants to know if we're reaching out to other communities to look at their licensing fees and how do our licensing fees compare to those? Are they in line? And should we consider beefing those up, in Tony's words, to assist with some additional public safety?
The city initially contracted a consultant to assist us with that, and I think this is a new process for us. And, anybody else has to add to this, but you know, it's dynamic, so we're looking at it to make sure that what we're charging will meet the demands of labor and our services, and to enhance our service to this new industry as well.
All right, I'm Jim, city manager, the newer one. The other one too is that some things we just can't add on. We have to charge for what the staff time is or what the processes are. We're not allowed as a city through different propositions, like say 26, to just say it's $100 to do the process, but we want another $100 to go towards enhancing the police department or the fire department. We're not allowed to do that, unfortunately. So it is a time and service type of charge. If we want to do something like that, we would have to come back to the council through a ballot initiative to say, let's get the public to vote on it. Then we could do that, but we just cannot arbitrarily as a city do that.
Well, on news, local news, KSBY, they had publicly announced what their fees were in San Luis Obispo City. It was quite hefty. And I don't know if that went on the ballot, or does that go before the city council, or how do you get the assistance we need for public health and safety?
Some of that we have to go back as they do an audit on it. Like we'll do is we go through, and Becca's talking finance, we'll have to go through and take the hours, look at what everybody charged to it. I know when I look at the final one, it's about 20 minutes. It's just going through and seeing if there's anything. I have a couple questions here or there that are really easily answered. But we'll go through everybody that touches that, look at what that is from the cost analysis compared to what the deposits were, and we'll go back and either reimburse or there might be a cost that we have to bring back. Each city might set it higher, not knowing what they're going to cost. And if that's the case, they might have a larger reimbursement going back to the applicant at that point.
Okay, we just have a couple more questions.
John was going to comment on that too.
Oh, I was just going to say.
This is, okay, so does a small business have to be concerned if they do business with the marijuana industry? For example, a packaging company, a graphic designer, an auto dealership, could these purchases by the marijuana industry be money laundering?
The short answer to the question is no. If you're not touching the product, you don't need a license. You can conduct business like any normal capitalist would do.
Okay, so I've read this question a few times, and I'm going to read it as it's written. If it's confusing, I'm going to ask the person to stand up and maybe clarify. If a business leaves a protected zone and they are the reason for the radius, are applicants able to make application with an agreement they are leaving the zone? Does that make sense? Anybody out there want to take this?
That's me again.
All right, Debbie, help us out here.
Okay. So in some instances, you have somebody who is, again, either a youth center or something that has created the zone. They are the point the radius goes around. So now the person wants to leave the zone. They don't want to be in that zone, and they've decided to move on or sell their business or do whatever they're doing, relocate out of that zone. So you have people wanting to make applications with everybody else in that zone. Can they make that application knowing that that person is selling the goods or leaving the zone, or if they're leasing it or something, and they've signed something that says, as soon as this is complete, I'm out? I mean, is that a possibility? Can they still go in the zone if a person is leaving the zone that causes the zone?
Get in the zone.
I specifically asked that question to Ms. Gallagher before she relocated, and the question was forwarded to City Attorney Mr. Bononi at the time, City Attorney at the time. The answer was the appropriate way to do that would be to allow the opportunity for everyone to do that, and it would have to come before council to make that change. I would assume that Mr. Malawi would take the same position, and I recognize the tendency for a city attorney to give very conservative advice. But the short answer was that the city would not permit an applicant to proceed on a one-off basis type thing. So the council would have to say, is everyone can do this, by agreement, a sensitive use agreed, yes, really? Then everyone would be have the same opportunity.
Even if they are in an escrow to purchase?
It was unqualified.
Okay, so this is the last question that we're going to address. If you have, I do have time for maybe one or two more, so if you want to get a question in, now is the time to do that. What does legal mean for use? Can a person vape or smoke in public? And can they have product on them in public?
I can say that if they legally purchase it, they can have it. If they're consuming it in public, they're going to be held to the other guidelines and procedural restrictions as well, or the law as well too. The big issues are, we going to allow people to smoke in public? If someone takes exception to that. If someone's under the influence of the public, we're going to have to take appropriate action as well.
From a consumption standpoint, if it's allowed, indoor smoking is allowed. So if you're allowed to smoke cigarettes there, you can smoke cannabis.
That was my understanding.
Yeah, it's just, you know, you have to limit the smoking areas, which affect cigarette smokers, tobacco smokers. But that is kind of the state.
But as far as openly smoking in the street, that could be deemed a violation as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like an unaddressed area. I think there's no precedent.
Joe, did you want to say something?
Hi guys, my name is Joe Garcia. I'd like to add to this. Medical and recreational cannabis has complete different use. The laws are different. I know that Proposition 215, some of those aspects have sunsetted just recently. However, what was referenced, I believe, is regarding cannabis in public use. The city of Lompoc has specifically addressed this concerning parks. They have specifically banned cannabis use where it says that smoking is allowed in parks. So we know that that is by city ordinance illegal in the city. However, as a medical patient, a person has the right to carry cannabis on them and to use cannabis anywhere that smoking is allowed by law, unless it has specifically been banned by the city. That's all I have to say on that. Thanks.
I was just going to say, speak up for the social media.
Debbie, based on what he's saying there, would that be the 1,000-foot radius though? Because it says there's no use in a 1,000-foot radius, no consumption. So does that change the other
Those setbacks are
guidelines?
specific to commercial operations, not personal use.
Okay, so we have run out of questions, which is actually perfect for time. So I want to give a huge round of applause for our panelists. Thank you so much. I was really pleased when we started discussing hosting this forum when I reached out to Jim initially. We were able to get everyone here without having to twist too many arms, and it seems like a conversation that everyone is really eager and willing to have, and it's important, and I hope that you guys learned something today. I know I did, so thank you again. I also want to thank my staff, Marley Bedford and Betty Van Molson, for their hard work on this event today. Thank you to Marla and Michelle for helping facilitate the questions. And again, the Hilton Garden for a lovely venue and fantastic food. So thanks so much for everyone here, and we'll see you soon.